Not yet, anyway.
Welcome to the Oscoda Township meeting, December 10th, 2018. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Ms. McGuire.
Here.
Mr. Gasky.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. Next for agenda additions, I have one item to add to Superintendent Report, item J, for the F&B contract amendment.
I would also like to be able to add a work session and to be able to propose a work session for the strategic efforts with Joe Borgstrom.
Put that under other number 4. Any other changes or additions? Need a motion to set the agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Cummings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda's set. Now have the public hearing for the 2019 budget presentation. Need a motion to go into the public hearing.
I'll move to go into the public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now in the public hearing.
All right. So the 2019 proposed budget summary, as provided in the board packet, shows 2019 proposed appropriations for total for the general fund of $3,209,078 and total other funds of $7,883,894. And so that has total appropriations for all funds of $11,092,972. So what we had three budget work sessions that were open to the public, and we also ran in accordance with the law, the newspaper ads associated with the budget. It was on display in the clerk's office for inspection, and we want to be able to move forward with the 2019 appropriations.
All right. Does anybody in the audience have comments or questions regarding the 2019 budget?
Westwood Drive, Oscoda, and I have to admit, I have not made an opportunity to go through line by line, so I'm hoping that this question is not way out of whack. However, the township, I've been told, does not own very many roads in the town, mostly road commission, county, or state. But the township does have responsibilities for certain activities on roads, predominantly gravel roads. And there are two responsibilities that I know of. One is predominantly the dust control, And another one is the potential, and the task force that you had looked into this, and I believe, Aaron, you mentioned once that you contacted other townships to augment, yeah, you ought to get the clock going if I'm, augment what the county does on the gravel roads. And so there have been a number of discussions that I brought up this issue with Aaron. I think you may be the only trustee that I've talked to in the last 3 years about it, and then at one township meeting. But I also attended a work session, and at that work session, I asked, is the task force looking into last year the situation where the county or gravel roads become so impassable that they actually have to be shut down? And I know of a couple in the Lakewood Shores area. And the county actually puts up signs and you cannot go. The fire trucks cannot go down, the school buses cannot go through. That the roads are so bad and the potholes are so bad that you can't use the road also. In one place it gets flooded because of the way the water runs and it's not graded properly. Now those are predominantly county responsibilities. However, townships have, such as Hale or Plainfield Township, have taken it upon themselves, and other townships in the county, as I've checked with the road commission, and a number of townships have contracts with the road commission to bring gravel in that the township pays for, to supplement, to make sure that roads and our constituents have safe roads. I think that to the tune of something like $80,000 for Plainfield, they pay as a contract. And I was told at a work session in March that that issue of both the dust control, which my neighborhood has supplemented to fill in what the township does, and also the gravel, supplementing gravel, would be discussed into the budget. And that was in March. And I just want to know if there was a discussion about that, and does the budget include something to help the areas of the town with gravel roads? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Byer?
Arnie, do you remember whether you went to a road meeting or was it a work session?
It was a work session right here.
Okay,
One of your work sessions. It was a Friday work session.
okay.
I'm sorry, I haven't had much time in the last year to go to a lot of the other task force meetings.
I think, as a member of, we have a road committee, and I'm a member of that, and Martin and Aaron, three of us. I'm just guessing here, and I may be wrong, but you're citing Plainfield and other townships that do certain things.
Right. And Aaron said that he talked to towns during that task force
Okay.
meeting thing a year ago to check to see what other towns, so there's due diligence there.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what has filtered down.
Well,
to this budget. It's a small item of the budget.
Yep.
And it's not important for this meeting here, but maybe.
Well, it could be. I just want to answer your concerns a little bit. Maybe I'm not going to answer them, but 9 out of the 11 townships in this county have a dedicated road millage. 9 out of 11. Plainfield is one of them. We do not.
Well, that's a solution. I just want to know
Yeah.
right now, was there a discussion, was there a decision specifically to that, to come up with a solution,
Can you-
or to kick it down the road?
Can you give him a little bit to answer your?
Or anyway, I don't recall, I know what you're talking about, I know the roads that get covered with water in the spring and stuff like this, but I'm just saying that there are other townships, and you named one primary one, that has extra money, like we just passed a millage for police, and we passed one recently for equipment for the fire department, and we have quite a few fairly recently passed millages, but not a road millage. I really don't think the public is in the mood for another one right now. I don't know about, but that might be part of the answer, that we don't have the wherewithal that other townships may have. And,
I'd like to say,
Yeah.
I would not be satisfied with that kind of an answer. I appreciate the details.
yep,
Because there are citizens in the township that would disagree with that answer.
okay,
We would like to have a millage to pay for a reasonable maintenance of our gravel roads that you coordinate with the county.
Yep.
So it's a coordinated effort, so we have safe roads for 12 months. I'll just leave it at that.
okay.
Thank you.
And I'm not against trying for one at all, you know. So, but I've heard a lot of talk about, wow, I just got my tax bill and it's up higher, and I said, people voted for these things, and
$80,000 out of a 11 million
yeah,
budget.
okay, I get your point. All right, thanks.
One comment on that, I would just point to in our budget, we do have $50,000 in the 2019 proposed appropriations for road improvement.
Those I would assume would be SADs.
No,
They're not? No? They're for dust and gravel, or just dust?
Part of that is for dust.
Fortunate.
The main majority of that amount is for possible paving or repaving projects that we may,
Right. You maintain the
Yeah.
hard roads.
Right.
The county do a good job at that. I'm talking about gravel roads, which are difficult in
right,
certain seasons. I'm just asking for equal treatment.
have you asked of any of this for the road commission?
You can call them and verify. I send in emails to their website. I have called them at least once a quarter, and we've had good response. They brought gravel. They brought at least 6 loads this year. They brought about 80 yards of gravel to fix that water situation that we had, and it's partially fixed. So they've responded. They have. So we're just looking for teamwork, basically. And nine
Well,
out of
yep.
how many townships in the county?
11,
Oh, out of 11
yes.
have thought, and they've made provisions to come up with a reasonable solution.
Yep. I don't mind, I'm not trying to argue with you,
No,
but,
I'm not either.
but the other townships that have come up with something like that, they don't have a fire department or a 24/7 police department to maintain, things like that. We have a lot more costs than they do.
And we have a bigger population.
Yeah, we have a bigger population,
It's
and
just,
so,
this is going longer than I expected.
oh, it's my fault. Don't worry about it, it's my fault. I felt you needed an answer, or at least a partial
I would
answer.
have just accepted a yes or no, and then that's final enough that I would have walked out of the room and go have dinner. But
Okay.
But it will come up.
Good,
I'll assure you of that, because those roads, when the pothole gets to be 8 inches deep and your tires break through the gravel, because the gravel roads will wear away, especially if the dust control's not constant enough, it wears away, and your tires go right through the gravel into what used to be the woods. And you break a front end, you bust the tire, or you go off the road, and there are school buses on some of these roads. And I have pictures where tires have broken right through, and all you see is muck, you know, the black earth of when they built the road and they put it on top. And that is not safe for our kids in the schools, it's not safe for us driving, and it's definitely not getting fair treatment with tax money. Because I'm taxed pretty much the same.
But not out of our tax. Township receives no money, no tax money for roads.
That's on the receiving end. I'm talking about I pay township taxes, property taxes that you keep, the township keeps. And 9 out of 11 townships in the county have decided to do that in some fashion.
No,
Whether it's a millage.
right, out of a millage. But we don't have a millage, and we've discussed, we've already discussed that, and there are plans to try to put one up in the future.
I would suggest when it gets really bad, rather than just you being the Lone Ranger and calling
It's
the,
not just me.
okay, your neighbors, why don't you lean on us a little bit and say, because I think if they start getting concerned calls from the Board of Trustees, that would help also.
Well, I was doing that. Aaron,
Yep.
we don't own a ride.
So far, it hadn't worked when I talked to Bruce Bolin about it.
Right.
The people who own the roads.
It's not gonna get you
Right.
anywhere, and I expect the township can do something.
Okay,
So, thank you for the opportunity.
sure.
Does anybody else have any comments for the budget? Any board members?
Dave, do you have you weren't here, but what was the budget amount for 17? Do you have that figure?
Not at my fingertips.
Okay, all right.
For you're saying for 203? Or
2017,
All funds?
18, this year, that's ending. We're talking about 11 million for 19.
Oh, it was much higher, mainly due to Fund 591 Water Fund. There was nearly $6 million appropriated to that for water main extension. So you're talking, it was north of 15 million for 2018, but that is now gonna be reduced.
Okay. I'm just looking for a comparison.
I can probably bring that up. Sorry, it's not connecting.
That's okay, that's all right.
Sorry.
Sometime,
Okay, any other comments? All right, then I need a motion to come out of public hearing.
so moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Now we're in the public comment period. For this one here, the first one, fill out a card and provide it to the superintendent. There's a 4-minute time limit. And when you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Do we have any cards?
We do have Tom Barbrett with about the nativity.
Just to the board, after watching the letters to the editor last week, I thought somebody ought to come to you and just say thanks. If you haven't noticed it yet, you ought to go see it. As of today, there's even more to see. We have actually doubled the size of the nativity. We have beautified it. And just to let you know, in the 3 weeks, or actually 3.5 weeks that we had to do this quickly, we raised over $5,600. And everything was paid for in cash, taken care of. And as of thanks that Dave happens to be here, Dave and Vinny did a great job along with their staff and all the churches, and there'll be a nice big thank you in the paper this week that, by the way, was paid for by somebody else also. It was amazing to me. I was walking down the street, people were handing me money.
Wow.
So I'm going to be walking the streets a lot. But I wanted to thank the board because if you wouldn't have agreed to that, we wouldn't have stopped right there, and everything looks very well. And in fact, I was in Frankenmuth today picking up our final figures that are going in tonight and tomorrow and so on. And believe it or not, Oscoda has the largest display on the East Coast, other than Frankenmuth.
Wow.
So talk
East
about
Coast-
a win-win situation.
East Coast of Michigan or the
East
United
Coast of the United States. No. So I just wanted to say, and I guess people don't say it enough to you, but thank you for your decision. And I'm just real pleased that we're able to do this. And thank you to all the people that made it a possibility. So just thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Much
It
appreciated.
looks so much improved.
It's great.
Very nice.
Wait till you see the star and the other stuff, right, Dave?
Wow. Awesome.
Any other comments?
That's it.
All right, now we're on to the consent agenda. Any comments regarding the minutes for November 26th and both sets of minutes for November 26th?
I just point out that I put a revised copy of the minutes on the table to each board member based on comments or input from Mr. Palmer at the Friday work session. And there also, Mr. Byer had noted that on one of the portions of the minutes, it says, let's see here, board appointments, and then doesn't specify which board on the supervisor's report. That was the LDFA. If you couple the minutes with the agenda and the board packet, two pieces to a puzzle, but we could change that if the board wanted to add more specificity, but those are my only comments.
Which do we usually keep electronic copy of? Do we keep the minutes and or the?
All of them are permanent records for the state of Michigan.
Okay.
So sometimes you find, no matter how specific you can get in the minutes, you need both. They're kind of,
Right.
they go together.
Keys.
They complement each other. But it doesn't hurt to be more specific, then you don't have to go digging. So it was a good point by Mr. Byer. It's vague in the minutes themselves. If you only have those,
Right.
you wouldn't be able to decipher what board it was.
Any comments regarding payment of bills for $93,483.17? Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented, modified a little bit, but basically presented.
What's your modification?
Well, we talked about a correction in the minutes and stuff, small stuff.
So the one that Mr. Nordine mentioned?
Yes.
Okay.
On the board table, okay.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, subcommittee reports and project updates. First one I have is update for the Township Strategic Work Session on Friday the 7th.
All right, so last Friday at 10 a.m., Mr. Joe Borgstrom from Place and Main Advisors came up. We held a work session to go over the results of the SWOT analysis from the 29th and the 6 targeted customer focus groups on the 30th of October, as well as the community survey that we had posted online. From there, we took those results and noted some different trends and some similar themes that were coming through. From there, we took a first crack at a vision and a mission for Oscoda Township. We did not get to goal setting, and that is why we added the item to create a work session for Mr. Joe Borgstrom to come back up and go through that with us. I did send out to the board the presentation that Joe put together for place and main advisors, and then as well as the initial Word document that we had up on the screen here to kind of noodle that between now and the next work session.
Any comments for that? Next item is the Township Facility IT infrastructure improvements.
Yeah, so we will be having a work session on the 9th of January. It's already scheduled, and I just asked Mr. Schaefer to tag on the agenda to include the discussion of the recabling and the telephone system replacement upgrade at Township Hall. So that's it.
Does anybody have anything else for project updates? Okay, next for BSNA access controls. During our last audit, there were discrepancies noted related to separation of duties. To help facilitate improvements, I'm presenting a proposed policy on handling BSNA access along with security controls. Also included is a chart outlining which positions have certain access. These have been coordinated and adjusted with significant input from the superintendent, treasurer, and clerk, and department heads have also provided their input for which access they need. I will note there is one item that Ms. McGuire brought to me a little bit ago today, and that was regarding the computer that's on the counter as to how access for that would work.
Right.
So my only comment related to that is that if we go ahead and pass this policy and chart today, then in the January meeting, we will do modifications to show how that computer will be handled.
Now, are we looking at the version that is in the board pack, or are we looking at the version you emailed
The
this
version that I
afternoon?
emailed today has a change in it regarding the paragraph for separation of duties where it gives an example in the general ledger, and that's been modified to match the chart.
Right, and honestly, I
So-
can't tell where the change is because it's not redlined, so I just see a black and white image. I don't know what word or words changed.
So under the separation of duties, it had in there that the clerk was gonna have general ledger access and no one else will.
Right,
The modified version has in there that the clerk and treasurer will both have access to the general ledger and no other departments will.
I see that now, thank you. Okay, so we're open for questions? Okay, great. So, so I wanted to ask, first of all, I want to say that thank you very much. I think this is a team effort to put this together, and thank you, everybody, to address the audit concerns. There's a section on page 2 of that policy that's budget changes and override of budgets. So it says all requested budget changes are set in the software and, are to be brought to the township superintendent for review and consideration. And it talks about what happens if we want to, the ability to override a deficient budget. And so my question here is, so explain to me how this gets used. Like, when would that paragraph apply?
I can answer that probably.
Sure.
When we do accounts payable and Jane is entering that, or I'm entering into the accounts payable system, let's say it's for stuff we buy from Quill for supplies.
Right,
And she's entering it for each fund number. So let's say I ordered something and it gets charged to 253,726 for supplies, and I've gone over my budget. It'll tell her you're exceeding what you're budgeted. And so what we would do at that point now with this we would not let it override that, and we would bring it to Dave's attention, and we would address it at that point. so that there would not be any overruns of the budget.
Got it. Okay.
And then that way, let's say there was something that was equipment or something like that that was not foreseen, and we needed to make a budget adjustment for it, that Dave would make the adjustment at that point, bring it to the board if we needed to, and we would then adjust it, and then it would be able to get entered into that line item.
Okay. So adjustments are kind of one of two things, it sounds like. It's either we move appropriated money around based on what we want to decide to forego or take money away from or something, or we change the allocation,
To something
a budget.
else.
Yeah,
Right, or actually, sometimes people, department heads make a mistake and write down the wrong GL number,
Yep.
which is a good catch there too, because then that way we're not charging it to something that they didn't want to charge to in the beginning.
right. Right. And so far, what we've been doing is we've been overriding.
Sometimes we've been overriding, but it's always been brought to the former superintendent's
Right.
attention and to Dave's now, and we've been adjusting it. We've never just overridden it and just let it go. It's just a formalization.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
And then you said there will be changes coming. We need to reconsider this in January.
The, yes.
Okay.
There'll be, the policy portion may need a change in it, but there
Okay.
will be a change in the chart for sure, just specific to that one computer at the front counter of the treasurer's office.
Okay.
Right, under the login section. Right,
Right.
yeah.
All right, well then, I move that we accept the BSNA access controls policy, the version being the one that stipulates clerk and treasurer share general ledger access.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gieske.
Just so we're clear, that includes the deputy treasurer, because she does the bank recs, and she does have access to general ledger.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, to me, deputy and
Treasurer Department.
Treasurer's
Treasurer's
office.
office.
Okay, all right.
are pretty much
Office, yeah.
duplicated.
Okay.
Yep, that's right. And need to be. Yep, that's right.
Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes,
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yeah.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, board appointments. We have the last position that's expiring in 2018 on the LDFA, and that is for Mr. Don Nolan. I make a motion that we reappoint Mr. Don Nolan to the LDFA for a term expiring 31 December 2022.
support.
Any comments? Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yeah.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes,
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. And next is a resignation from the DDA board. Mr. Gary Price has submitted a resignation. And I make a motion that we accept Gary Price's resignation.
Support.
Any comments on it?
I think the last time we had a resignation from the DDA board, I asked, was IMSA Aki?
Okay.
Okay, yeah. I asked that a thank you note be sent to her. Did that happen?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Could we do the same for Attorney Gary Price? Please?
I will make that happen, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, superintendent reports, the Downtown Development Authority 2019 proposed budget.
All right, the DDA held a special board meeting last Thursday, December 6th at 4 p.m. in the Huron Shores Artisan Hall to discuss revisions to its proposed 2019 appropriations for DDA Fund 248 and DDA Operating Fund 252. So that meeting was taking place while I was putting together the board packet. I provided hard copies of the revised budget for 248, Fund 248 and Fund 252. And that was provided last Friday at the work session, the 7th. So the major notation in there is the line item associated with repayment of the proposed intergovernmental agreement for the DDA to pay back the $88,000 outstanding with Huron Community Bank over 3 years. So that methodology is what was incorporated into that revised budget. So the total proposed for Fund 248 is $70,000 for 2019, and the revised Fund 252 appropriations total $22,000 for Fund 252.
And when we talked about this 2 weeks ago, we were talking about projects should be set aside, and my comment was I don't think they have any projects for this year. Am I right on that?
That is my understanding.
0 projects for the coming year. Okay,
I think the focus is on the hall.
yes. Okay.
Any other comments?
Well, I would just like to comment that at the last meeting, I brought up that I was disappointed with the budget that had been proposed. I thought the focus of the appropriations were misdirected to a certain extent. And the figures that they had down didn't even pay it off in 5 years. Now, this budget doesn't exactly pay it off in 3 years because they've appropriated $29,000, which over 3 years is $87,000. The balance remaining is 88, with the ticker still running on interest. However, they have, I was at the meeting last Thursday, and this was, excuse me, this was discussed, and I think the DDA is more aware now of where their priorities need to be to focus on paying off the debts that they have. And by appropriating $29,000, and I think what should be specified in our intergovernmental agreement is that in the 3rd year of that agreement, whatever balance is remaining, they will pay off, which would be in their budget for that fiscal year. So there's still a few things that are a little disappointing in this budget. They've allowed for an employee, but they haven't figured in payroll taxes and that sort of thing. But
That's right.
I think they have. There was quite a shift at that meeting in their thinking and the attitude of this board and that board trying to cooperate a little more and come to an agreement. And I think they did that Thursday. And so I believe I could support this budget at this time now. So.
What is the interest rate that we're charging the DDA for the loan?
0.
Okay, so we're essentially bailing them out at no cost. Is that right? I mean, I guess the answer is yes, because we're not charging them for it. Okay.
Just a quick comment. I was not at this meeting. I couldn't be there. I heard part of it was quite volatile. But I hate to see the board make really specific comments and projections about what kind of income they have to pay the debt off. This is their first year coming up. They haven't had a complete year. In my estimation, it's a little early to precisely say how much money they will have to pay off the debt. And I will repeat what I said 2 weeks ago. This year that's ending is not a normal year for the DDA. Their expenses as far as the building and the modifications of the building and the purchase of the navigation light and placement of same, those are projects that are really special, but they had to kind of go into those because the price was right. The objects were for sale. For instance, the light, you either buy it or a guy from Traverse City wanted it, and you gotta act now. So I don't think this was a normal year, and I think it's too early to determine specifically how much money they will have to generated to pay off their debts.
That's a fair point, but at the same time, we don't try to determine precisely how much we're going to make at Old Orchard Park each year either, when we're using that money to subsidize other failing,
But Tim, we
losing
have
ventures.
like 20 years of Old Orchard Park records to look at.
Right. Unfortunately, it increases year to year. But in this case, to your point, I mean, we don't know, but the point is that there should be, some information there. I mean, we can't assume zero, but if you have to assume zero, the
Right.
budget has to balance on zero income. So,
Well, I understand it could be less than some of the projections that I hear bandied about here. I
Right.
don't think it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be in excess, but,
I'm good with excess. I'm good with it exceeding the number.
and I'm thinking, what they're doing is not just their own little private thing here. It benefits the whole community. To me, you don't have to agree, but they took one of the ugliest buildings in this community.
Right.
Like, I don't know how many times over the years, like, how come that is still there? Why don't somebody knock that down? Who owns that? And on and on. And they bought it. They did put the money into it. I know it was costly. It's beautiful now. And then adding the navigation light / lighthouse out in front as passing traffic, look at that, and they turn their head, and it draws their attention to this new building in the back. It benefits the whole community. It's not just some little thing they have in their back pocket.
The
Right.
DDA board did have consensus that, they agreed to paying back the township over 3 years, but they did have consensus that based on what it looks like, what their budget looks like at the end of 2019, they may pay more into it to pay the building off faster.
That's good, yeah.
So everybody from the DDA then was happy with the revision?
As far as I know. I mean, they were in agreement. I don't know if I can say happy, but they were in agreement
So did you guys have to vote on the revision or no?
for the 3 years, yes.
Yeah. And so everybody was happy and voted yes?
Yes.
Jim, you're absolutely right. It is certainly a beautification. You can't deny whether we're talking about the building or whether we're talking about the red light. I mean, I like that something happened. Hands down. The method is where I have my problem. And the fact is, in June, I was worried that this was going to end up on our balance sheet, and it actually did, without our vote. This is where I have the biggest problem with the transaction. We effectively, the organization became, let's just say the finances became very difficult, and we had to bail them out. That's a concern, and that's where now where the DDA district, as one area, one set of businesses and properties who are benefiting from the DDA, it's now spilled over for the whole township to have to support that's where I have the problem. And that's where I feel as though folks who are running businesses, I feel, have the ability to have provided better oversight of the finances and the way that this went down. That's where I have my issue.
And I don't want to get into that discussion tonight, but we never had to give them any money.
We're just now giving them a loan for 0% interest.
We don't have
And we've
to
been-
Yeah.
give them a loan.
And we've been-
And we
and we-
haven't done that yet.
But we also paid bills earlier this month, or this year. Remember when we were taking over their
No.
finances and paying bills on
No,
their
we have
behalf, were
never
we not?
paid, we have never paid any money out of township money for the DDA bills. Never.
Just the loan.
We've brought them in and given approval over every bill that was during a period of time during the freeze.
They
period,
have
but that
over,
was-
they
that was
have over
DDA
$50,000
cash.
still in their account.
But I thought they were broke.
No, they were never broke. And their appropriations to the budget was out of line and needed to be
Right.
adjusted. They were never broke.
Interesting. That's not the story I've been hearing all of this time, though. Because here it is why are we giving them a loan for $88,000 if they've got 150 sitting in an account?
They've got 50 sitting in an
50.
account.
50, I'm sorry, I heard 150.
Yeah, no,
Fair enough.
50.
And my perspective is we've all but dictated that they will pay this loan off and we will pay the loan off and they will pay us back. I mean, that's been direction from us that's led to that, as evidenced by they want to do it in 5 and we're put the hurry up on them to do it in 3. So I think a lot of the information you're referencing has come from this board.
Yeah,
Not being
that's
put
right.
out into there, and now we're recycling and saying, well, I don't know where that's coming from. I think a lot of it's come from us.
They've always had money in their checking account.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing that specifically in prior meetings, though. So,
I'm pretty sure I mentioned it a couple times, actually, because I wanted to be clear that it's just a budget, it's a budget adjustment, but it's not affecting their cash. Actually, I know I said it at the last meeting, so.
oh, I wasn't at that one, so thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
All right. So are we here to approve the loan? Is that what we're doing tonight?
Just
No.
the budget.
Just the budget, got it.
Which lays out the plan of, it kind of takes one step down the way to formalizing that we'll pay off this loan with their budget plans, at least in 1 year, to extrapolate that they'll have it paid off in 3. So,
I got it. Okay.
I mean,
I just have one more question, Joe, probably either Aaron or Marty. Marty, you were at that last meeting, right?
Yeah.
In regards to Bill's concerns about the employee that's budgeted in their budget, are they for certain that's what they're gonna do, or they're not sure, or you might be able to reallocate that money to pay more to the loan next year instead of
That's what they
firing somebody?
indicated. The rest of this year, they didn't think they were going to have time to even look for a manager, hall manager.
Okay.
And they're gonna appropriate their money towards the principal
Okay.
of the loan to help pay it off sooner. So they could get this loan paid off, so if any other project comes up, they have enough monies to match the grants, because the grant's gonna be probably pretty big. And that's what they're looking to get this loan paid off also, so they can have money to match grants.
So then that would address some of the concerns you had,
Yeah,
Bill.
yeah, and I would just like to reiterate that I was at their meeting in November when they were pushing to have this paid off over 5 years. They wanted to go 5 years because the reasoning being that if a project came up, if they weren't sure that they would not have money to use for matching funds for a grant. But in the discussion last Thursday at the meeting, I think there was consensus there that they were happy with doing it in 3 years and getting it over with. And if they can do it quicker, that seems to be their thought process. So, and I brought up the idea, I think, I said that I haven't been at all their meetings, but I have not heard a lot of discussion by that board about selling the building. I think that would be the appropriate steps to take, is to market that building for sale. They did a beautiful job of renovating that building, and that's totally within the purview of a DDA function, is to take rundown property, rehabilitate it, and revitalize it, and so you can put it back on the tax rolls as a functioning operating business. To operate as a rental hall for them to take on and try and operate a business along with trying to look for other projects to do, I think is a little more than they really should be undertaking. But, there's 7 very smart people on that board. I think the whole idea was that they would have articles of incorporation and would be a board unto themselves. We merely have to approve their budget. Like I said before, I was not happy with the original budget that was brought to this board. But this revised budget that they revised on Thursday focuses more on items that should be focused on. So I would be willing to approve this.
In kind of carrying on what part of Bill said, that we approve the budget under this new format. Well, we always have. It's always been our role. But a question came up at the last meeting, and I should say before I say that, I think we're coming to a point where we hopefully are going to do this here, which is good. So I don't mean to derail us by any means, but going forward, the question that came up last meeting was, to what extent can we go down and dive into their budget and dictate? And I still am interested in the answer to that question for future years. We need to know our role, I think, in exactly what our abilities are in stepping down. So it's just something I think we need an answer on that. Hopefully we don't need it this year. Hopefully we can but.
Yep.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the budget for the DDA.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Oscoda Shared Services Contract for 2019.
All right, the contracts which govern provision of services by Oscoda Township to Oscoda Township are updated each year through addenda to accommodate budget appropriations for the upcoming fiscal year. Board members will find attached updated documents which reflect calculations based on the proposed fiscal year 2019 budgets. As discussed during the November 14th Township Board Budget Work Session number 3, the methodology now includes overhead and building allocation chargebacks for both police and fire service provision. This is the only major modification from previous practice, and Oscoda Township Administration is aware of this change.
Comments?
Yeah, David, I noticed here, and you've repeated it because you're reading this, they're aware of the change. Do
Correct.
they have a problem with it in any way?
No, and actually in the 2018 budget for administrative chargebacks, it was calculated, but then we didn't implement that into the chargeback or the service provision. And based on my discussion with the board at the budget work sessions, it was calculated last year, but not implemented. So Oscoda could understand what that amount would be. And then in 2019, the plan was to actually implement that. And so during those discussions previously, we'll get into the next topic, which is the reimbursement for the old dive van. So they understood, and if they had to build a township hall that had a police and fire department in it, obviously their cost would have been significantly more. And so we use a square footage methodology to be able to charge back Oscoda for the police department and fire department portion of 101-265, which is Township Hall maintenance and grounds.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
I'll move to authorize the township supervisor and township clerk to execute the service contract addenda subject to approval of the Oscoda Township Board.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
I have a question. Can I ask it before or after?
We just started the roll calls.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
When, are they gonna have a meeting before, the new year starts?
Their next one is a week from the 17th.
17th, okay.
All right, next, a Sabo reimbursement of $1,274 for the sale of the dive van.
All right, so your packet contains a very detailed methodology and rationale for why we are reimbursing $1,274 of the net proceeds of $5,200 for the sale of the old dive van. And that was part of these discussions with Oscoda Township administration. Okay, we understand you passed a police millage, we passed a police millage. So our contributions associated with 2 new officers and departmental equipment upgrades are significantly increasing from the 18 proposed budget to the 19 proposed budget. And they agreed, okay, that makes sense with the overhead and building allocation costs. What we want back in return is Oscoda said, well, when you're selling that equipment that we help pay for, we were hoping to be able to get a portion of those proceeds back. And so I said, okay, for police, it's the 21.1%, and for fire, it would be the 24.5%. So 24.5% of 5,200 is the $1,274, and that's they were agreeable to that, and they understand why we're doing that. But this is a new concept, so I wanted to be able to, although it is less than $2,000, I wanted the board to be aware and be in support of that reimbursement.
Comments?
Yeah, on the 24.5%, how much of that is broken down for maintenance of this vehicle, other than purchasing it?
The maintenance of the vehicle.
Do you mean that's
Oscoda Township
specific
absorbs
vehicle?
all of that? If they want reimbursement, but we absorb all the years of maintenance on it?
In our shared cost agreement, is that accounted for?
Maintenance of the vehicle, we
The
do not track the.
So
of
maintenance of a fire vehicle, is that included in the fire budget?
Yes,
And then is a portion of that being charged to Oscoda?
correct,
There is.
So they are paying a portion of maintenance on the vehicles.
correct. We take the budget, the entirety of 101,336, which would be the fire operating, and then you have Fund 206, which is all dedicated to fire equipment, and they get charged back the portion of that total. It's not line item by line item, it's the entirety. So any maintenance of those vehicles, any maintenance associated with the operating, those are all part of that budget that they get charged back.
What percentage of that is part of that budget, you know, offhand? Not 24.5%.
So for example, in Fund 202, or I'm sorry, 206. In 18, Fire department equipment replacement. Let's see here, fire department equipment, principal, charges for services.
I think it would be a 101,336 because that's just for capital purchases of the new equipment. The fire department's expenses, maintenance expenses, I think are in 101,336,
So let me
which
get to that.
which then we charge. Dave can correct me if I'm wrong. We charge Ensemble whatever 24.5% of our entire expense for 336, and the maintenance costs are in there.
So
They're
five
in the
thousand.
24.5%.
We do
Yeah,
pass
so
it
the-
along.
So they're paying us 24.5% of what we pay to maintain the vehicles.
Got it.
So for the line of equipment maintenance in 2019, we are proposing $5,000 worth of equipment maintenance.
Now, a question I wonder, I don't know the answer to this, does DPW, when they go and work on a car, does it get charged to there, or is that just equipment maintenance that we send out for?
A little vague.
Yeah, I'm just surprised by the 5,000.
Repairs and maintenance supplies.
Equipment maintenance is,
So repair and maintenance supplies is budgeted for $500 for the supplies associated with that repair.
vehicle maintenance is the 5,000, and right above that is equipment maintenance for 11,000.
Because previous, this step van had to have a $5,000 transmission put in it a few years ago.
Yeah, so as long
And
as
we
that
sold it
was,
for 5,000.
as long as that was coded to 101,336, Ensemble paid 24.5% of that, or whatever the ratio was in that given year.
Okay, so they are
So,
paying.
as long as it's getting coded to the right place, they're paying.
Okay,
It's a good question.
it is.
I don't mind giving them some money back if they're paying the maintenance on it. Their share.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, we approve the reimbursement to Oscoda Township for $1,274 for the step van.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gasky, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Oscoda Township request for sanitary sewer rate freeze.
All right, we've had several meetings with our neighbors to the south there. Third item for Osable tonight. So, Oscoda and Osable Township Administration met Monday, the 3rd of December, to discuss the scheduled 2% sanitary sewer rate increase effective 1/1 of 2019. And this all goes back to Resolution 2015-23, which was the sanitary sewer rate adjustments. What that resolution did was put a 2% increase, annual increase associated with the rates. And your packet contains the bulleted list provided by Osable Township Administration from that meeting on December 3rd. The Osable Township Administration is requesting that Oscoda Township Board consider freezing the current sewer rates charged and not apply the scheduled 2% increase. And Osable Township Administration is also requesting that the current sanitary sewer rates be frozen until the current methodology can be reviewed for appropriateness. And there is already, as Trustee Cummings mentioned, a work session on the 9th. It's scheduled for the 9th of January at 2 p.m. here. And that is when we will get the results of the rate study and explained by Mr. Tom Traciak associated with the Fund 590 for sewer and projecting that out, providing revenue projections as well as methodology. So that will be provided by and they want to obviously be able to attend that and better understand the revenue projections and understand what capital improvements are going to be projected over the next 20 years associated with the SAW grant.
Comments?
Well, I was just wondering if we, if they're requesting we freeze the rates for the entire year of 2019, or can we hold them effective 1 January 2019 until we've had a chance to discuss at our meeting on the 9th what our rates should be, because at one of the sewer meetings that I attended with you and our engineering staff and those there, we have some major infrastructure repairs that need to be done over the next 20 years, and it appears to me that in the past we have not budgeted appropriately for these coming expenditures in the forms of sewer rates. And so what I'm afraid of is that while I went through point by point on Sable's, and I can understand where they would consider that they're paying a higher rate than the Oscoda customers, my fear is even at that, it isn't high enough. And it seems to me it's pretty obvious that our Oscoda customers are going to be in for a rate increase. The question is how much to cover these millions and millions of dollars that we're going to have to spend over the next 20 years. So based on what they had, I can see where they would like to have a freeze for this year, and I would be in favor of that as long as once we make a determination what our rate structure should be, then that we can implement that for not only ourselves but Al Sable as well.
Yes, that is an option.
You got 212 customers on sewer?
Yes.
How far south does the sewer go?
Not very far south. I'm not sure exactly.
Probably down to the condominiums down
I don't know.
there. You got 212 customers, and we have 5,000 customers. You're gonna pay a higher rate on 212 than you are 5,000. There's no doubt.
My concern in all of this is that is the calculation for their rate drilled down far enough to ensure that it's accurate? We're not sure of that yet, and that's why we have Mr. Mr. Traciak looking into this. Because really, their 212 customers, that's their system, they're maintaining it. The only portion of the system of ours that they're using is the main line that runs to Station 4, and then Station 4 out to 25, and then 25 out to the lagoons. So the whole rest of our system doesn't, whatever maintenance we do on that should not be a burden of Asable. And I'm not sure if that was calculated in there or not. We have a lot more investigation to do.
And I think it's good to provide them with a justifiable and a rationale as to why we're charging you this amount. I'm not ready to assume that we haven't done that already and waive the 2%. I want to do it for them. I want to do it here soon with our upcoming studies, but I'm not ready to just assume that we've been doing it wrong this whole time, and thus we'll freeze your rates.
Yeah.
Do we have a quantifiable amount or a quantified amount about what we would be giving up in lost revenue with a 2% freeze?
Yes. So, in that bulleted list, what's mentioned on there $102,000, our anticipated expenditure for 2018 is 102,000. Get out my calculator here. Approximately $2,040
Over what period of time? Oh, for a year?
in 19. Yeah, so they're for 2018 they were anticipated 102,000, and then that is for just multiplying that by 1.02
Okay, I see what you're doing.
for $2,040. Okay, now if you just take the 102,000, multiply that by 1.02, then you're at the $104,040. You divide that by 212 customers, that's $490.75. But that would be about your average per customer. Now, obviously, they have some large customers down there that are, you know, a percentage contributing factor to that. Some service is much more expensive, much larger than your standard 3/4 inch for a typical residential customer.
Based on my surface look of this, is that I think their concerns are justified. And I think we're probably 9-10 months away from having an answer.
So are you recommending we freeze the 2% for a year, or 9 or 10 months, or what?
I think for, like what Mr. Palmer said, until we come to a conclusion on an appropriate rate structure.
Okay. Okay, so we don't put a specific time on it, we just use that verbiage until we have come to an agreement.
Yeah, I think that would be
Yeah, okay.
I think that would be the best option. Any other comments?
Yeah, no, so then I'm thinking about something Mr. Palmer said. So he was concerned because we weren't sure what the rate would be, but he was thinking potentially this rate could be even, we could be in a situation where the rate should be even higher, what I understood him to say. So given that, does it benefit Ensemble to do the rate freeze if potentially the rate will end up being higher anyway? Or we might end up getting into a situation where, I guess, what do we do? Maybe in 2020, we have to adjust it in a different way and modify the resolution of 2015? I mean, I don't see how it benefits Ensemble if we're anticipating that the cost is going to be higher down the road. What does the rate freeze do?
But we don't know. We don't have enough information.
No, but I'm saying, what does it do?
We're-
It means it puts them further behind. It means that they're not gonna pay the money, but we're already telling them that we're going to anticipate that they're gonna pay more. We don't know the number yet, I understand, but why would you do that to somebody?
I don't think the anticipation is justified well enough to make that a significant factor in the decision
The anticipation of the rate going higher?
of their rate going higher. We're lacking so much data right now to be able to use your concept on that as a weighted factor.
Okay.
I do understand what
Okay.
you're
No, I'm
saying.
thinking about what you said. I'm
Yeah.
really chewing on that for a bit, but okay, if we really have no clue, not only does that scare me, but how did we get to this point after all these years? But fair enough. I get that. All right. I understand what you're proposing.
Are we gonna freeze our rates on water then and not raise them in January too? Until we get the study done?
For water or sewer.
Water. Or, no, I'm sorry, sewer.
Sewer. No. I think it's highly weighted that those rates will go up. May not though. Again,
I'm
we've gotta go
for
through,
sure.
we've gotta almost start with a clean slate here, do a re-audit, make sure all formulas are correct. So that we know solidly to the penny that we're accurate with this.
Kind of with Tim though on that. I mean, why waiting? That would the answer, could,
I don't understand what waiting really does. I'm just trying to understand at the same time your proposal. I'm trying to really understand what I'm deciding
In
here.
Osable's case, this 2% is a significant amount per
$2,000.
user.
Okay, got it.
Per user, 212 customers.
we're talking about a significant increase to ours overall, just at a
Right.
glance at it. So, I'd be happy with 2% considering what we're looking at.
Well, when you factor in what Osable calculates for their sewer rates, for the operation of their sewer system,
Yeah.
and then throw on top of that what we're charging them for usage of our system,
Right.
that their per user rate is significantly more expensive than ours. So their 2% increase is much more dramatic per user to them than it
Right.
is to ours.
Fair enough.
And so what you can anticipate, I don't want to spoil the surprise here with Mr. Traciak, but it all boils down to kind of three factors. He calls it a three-legged stool.
Okay.
All right? There's no magic wand. He does not have a magic wand. He has an Excel spreadsheet where he can model reducing cash balance in that fund, issuing debt, or raising rates. Those are your options when you have to put 11 to 15 million dollars into a sewer system and you have a lot of lift stations in critical need. And the whole point of the SAW grant was to prioritize which of those capital projects are the most imminent or could cause the worst event if something were to fail.
So we prioritized the list of lift stations and et cetera. Okay. All right, well. Okay.
Any other comments?
Does Sabo have any plans of extending their service out to maybe help with their costs?
Not that I know of. I've asked them about an extension, they didn't have anything planned.
This has nothing to do with this, but when the water system, Herschel got, and down on Baldwin Resort Road, way back when, Tawas and East Tawas were the only ones that hooked up to that water system. Their water bills were well over $100 a month per customer in them two cities until they got an expansion, Oscoda, Sabo, then their rates start dropping. But for 2 years, it took for the rates to start dropping. And if we're gonna put a freeze on this with no limit on it, this can go to 2 years or better. It's something to think about.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think on another side to this, even if the rate is allowed to increase on January 1st by the 2%, it was the same, it's 2% that we've been raising it every year, correct? So we're still, the resolution still is in effect and everybody's known it, regardless of this concern we have about how we're gonna pay for more maintenance. So give me again, Dave, I don't understand the calculation you did. You said it was gonna be about $2,000. Was that $2,000 per person? That was overall, right?
Correct.
So am I dividing 2,000 by 212 users?
Correct.
So that doesn't come out to be a very big number. Why is this staggering? I don't understand.
Approximately $9.62.
Right, okay. So now I come back to the board and I'm looking at everybody who said that this sounded like a great idea and I'm saying, tell me why that's a problem.
For $90.
I think they've outlined it pretty well in this document. Because you put that on top of the increase they have to give their customers without Oscoda involved.
And did they say what that is? I'm not seeing that rate here exactly. Maybe
No,
it's built in.
Not in this
somehow. I've gotta-
document, but
Yeah,
their ready to serve charges are much
Higher.
more than ours.
they're higher, I see that, yeah. Well, what would they have done if we didn't have this issue?
Well,
We'd be approving the 2% for January 1st, and there'd be no question except what? I don't understand what we're doing here. I feel like we're kind of going in circles. I see the complaint, I see they're requesting we freeze it. I don't understand exactly why. I don't get the compelling reason to freeze it. They knew it was coming anyway, regardless of our budgetary problems.
Do you think the freeze is gonna hurt us? Or you just don't understand why they want it for themselves?
I don't understand why, if a resolution's been in place since 2015, why this 2% increase, which they knew would have been coming years ago, and they knew it was coming earlier this year, why it is now a calamity for them.
I agree with that.
It's something everybody knew was coming. And it is the same number. We haven't even adjusted anything yet. We haven't even had the bad news yet, which we seem to be implying here is coming. So I don't understand what a rate freeze does. I don't see how it solves any of this.
And I back to what I said earlier, I think we owe them a justifiable reason, whether we dig it out of past records as to why we did it, or we create a new method as to why we're charging them. I think
Right,
we should do that.
right.
And in the meantime, I don't see why the urgency to freeze the rates. I think
I
let
agree.
the effect take that's
Yep.
been planned for the last however many years, 3
Yep.
years since 2015,
Yep.
and we will work hard to figure this out over the ensuing months. That's where I'm coming at.
I agree with that as well, John. Turn that into a motion.
But, now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we have to vote on something here. We're either gonna freeze it or not freeze it, so
Right.
that on January 1st, we have something to go by, right?
correct.
Right.
For the rates. So we're either gonna go ahead with the 2%, or we hold off for a period of time before we implement that. I mean, well, we have to decide something tonight, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I already did explain that we do this rate freeze and it turns out that the rate does need to go up, that's gonna be a larger jump from that rate freeze, and they understood that.
It's, for me, unless I don't understand all the facets, and that could be, it's something they want. You've come up with some valid questions, but it's their problem, right? And we try to get along with Osable. Let's do it. Let's give them what they want.
Yep.
I see that. I do want to cooperate with Oscoda Township. My concern is, I get why they're asking. They're looking out for their residents. That's the motivating factor for them. They're trying to save their residents money. And I'm trying to do the same thing. And it's going to be at the expense of our customers. And yet it'll be spread thinner over a larger number, but it's still at the expense of our customers. I just don't see why now, on this meeting, at the last meeting of the year, we have to do this. Again, I don't have a problem figuring this out. I don't know why we're having it put to us right now with the urgency. I don't see the urgency like Mr. Cummings. I'm not trying to be obstinate and uncooperative to Oscoda Township.
Yep, I get it.
I'm not clear on what you're saying, John. We have to decide something tonight so that
Correct.
January 1st we can move forward. So you're saying that we just go ahead with the 2% increase and,
Yeah, I
Deal
say
with it
the
later?
decision tonight would be to acknowledge the request and say, and do nothing, but say, we see your concern, we will address it in the upcoming months. but to essentially take no act, to do nothing, to let the increase take effect as planned by the resolution from 2015.
And then we could address it in a next quarter, 3 months, 6 months, whatever.
Yeah, as soon as we can.
Once
yeah,
we've
try
determined what the, my,
Plan is.
my thought is that over the years, there has not been a big enough rate increase to cover the cost. And part of the problem with that is with infrastructure of this type, it's stuff that nobody ever sees. It's not like your roads that go bad, where you have potholes and everybody runs over them, and then they go to the township and scream, we want something done with our roads.
That's right.
Nobody screams about the sewer system until their toilets don't flush. And the
That's right.
problem that I see from what Ms. Garnham has pointed out to us and our engineers and so forth, that some of these lift stations and some of the lines that we have
Right.
are a critical mass in some instances, and we're gonna have to do something. Now, it's gonna be over a number of years. As Mr. Schaefer pointed out, it's a lot of money.
Yep.
And so, like you said, we have 3 options, and I think probably we'll have to use all 3 of those options to some degree. Part of it will be rate increases, part of it will be bonds, and, whatever else we can find to make these repairs and maintenance items happen.
Yep.
But, nobody's ever happy about this because everything's working fine right now, and you don't know there's a problem until there's a problem, and there's a real problem,
And
so.
in light of all that you said, I don't see the common sense in turning down 2%. I get the argument, but it just doesn't make sense to me, given everything we've got coming, to say, keep the money for now. I don't like that. I wish it weren't the case, but
Right.
just
Right.
But given that a significant portion of those improvements are parts of the system that Asable does not utilize, I don't,
Yeah, and
again, I
this is all-
don't think that should be a large factor in it.
this decision's based on an assumption that our methodology for charging them is flawed. And if you showed me that, I would maybe be on board, but it's just an assumption. I don't want to assume that we're
Correct.
wrong to the detriment of our users.
Correct.
If it was proven to me that we were wrong, then that'd be a different thing, but.
And
And I
moving
I have a lot of work and research to do back to 1986 when Osable came on. 1986, there was an original agreement. There have been several since. And in those, what I see is percentage increases. I have a lot more research to do to be able to understand the rationale and methodology for those percentage increases, because we don't just say 23% or 15%. There's got to be more than that. How that's baked into the contract, that's I need to do more research on that.
But to be fair to you and what you're describing, the onus on how this 2% or these percentages have been calculated over the years really rests with Mr. Tracyak, who's been advising us, correct?
He has been providing rate studies for a long time, yes.
So to be fair, it's not in your lap to figure this out. It's for him in a month to tell us what his justification is for these rates and how he's figured them out. And hopefully he has a good story. Because if all these rate studies over all these years have left us in this dire situation, it certainly leads me to wonder what he's been doing all these years.
That's assuming we had a good capital improvement plan telling him we want to achieve this. I mean, if we're telling him we only want to achieve this and he's setting our rates so that we can achieve that, then that's on
that
us,
would-
unless we're telling him we want to
True.
do X, Y, and Z.
Correct as well.
And hopefully we would be able to unearth a rate study that he's provided with his rationale listed in our records.
I agree.
And that's assuming he's been doing it since 1986 or before. And there's a lot, but I do see your point. I
Oh,
mean,
but even
yeah.
if he's been doing it for the last 10 years, we
Certainly.
could have something, right?
Certainly,
I mean,
yeah,
that's-
he had to have something originally to base.
And I don't know where he started from. I
don't
don't know
either,
his
yeah.
beginning,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
But
think it's
to
on
back
him.
to the point you made, Mr. Schaefer, that we've just been doing 2% increases on the original method. We implemented a method and then just increase them with cost of living as it grew and inflation and whatnot. We haven't changed the method since who knows when, because I certainly don't. And I commend you for going back to 1986.
Well done.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's well done.
All right, do we have a motion?
I would make a motion to acknowledge Asable's request, but to let the resolution from 2015 take effect, and make an effort to address their concerns in the near future.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Nordine, support by Mr. Cummings. Any other comments?
I would think we could, seems like we could hold off on the rate for a few months, and hold it steady, and then, because either way, we're gonna have to make an adjustment. If we put it in and find out it's too high, we're gonna have to rebate. If we freeze it for 3 months, and then find out that it has to be, we'll have to make an adjustment. So it seems like they've requested this freeze, let's just do it for a short period of time until we can figure out where we're at.
I agree, and I see it, the argument, and I'm on the fence. But if I'm going to err on one way, I want to err on the side of
Yep.
the benefit to our constituents versus theirs. That's what tips me.
Well, I see, it will have to be adjusted one way or the other. If we put the rate increase into effect and then find out that they had something coming, we'll have to refund
Yes.
money back to them. If we put the freeze in place and find out that the rate isn't high enough, we'll have to retroactively increase the rate. So either way, there's gonna be
Yes.
an adjustment that'll have to be made.
And if we have to make it back their way, I'll make the motion, and it'll include an apology for a waste of time and hassle. Because I do want to work with them, I really
Yeah.
do.
So
I think all these various slants to the problem, they know they're as able as we are to figure this out. And I repeat, it's something they want, and if it isn't gonna hurt us, whether we get the money right away or later, I'm in favor of giving them what they want.
I wanted to just clarify, I'm not trying to suggest here that this is an us against Asable. I
Oh,
don't
I
see
don't-
it that way
yeah.
as that point. Pardon me, Jim?
I don't think you do.
Okay, fair enough,
but-
thank you, I didn't hear what you said.
No, I don't think you do,
Yeah.
but I wonder if some people may interpret it that way.
No, I understand, but what I do feel is that if we do end up needing to provide a refund, well, that must mean that there was extra cash, and if there is extra cash, then a refund would be possible. I really wouldn't be too worried about it. How unfortunately, I just don't think that's gonna be the case, so I kind of look at this as a minimum risk on that point. But I'm ready to end comment here.
Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
No,
Mr. Cummings,
We're
Voting on no freeze.
no freeze, okay, then, yes, no freeze.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
no,
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
No. Motion's passed. All right, next, Consumers Energy easement request.
Consumers Energy is requesting an easement for electric facilities associated with the previously approved F41 street lighting project. Your packet contains the letter from the 29th of November from Consumers Energy, the proposed easement for electric facilities, and 2 exhibits defining the property and easement area associated with this request.
Comments?
is that easement area that they're showing, is that Ratliff Park?
Correct.
Are we ever gonna get this done?
We are working towards that, yes.
Maybe if we sign this easement.
Maybe they're too busy responding to power lines.
Ouch,
Now we're never gonna get it.
ouch.
I don't think that's.
strike that from the record.
Well, there have been stakes put in my yard several months ago, so
By consumers?
I think so.
Yeah.
Somebody put a stake in there.
They weren't burning sticks,
Yeah.
right?
Is there any, from this map, is there any indication that's gonna conflict with our plans for the park? Or do we, I don't wanna keep going back to Beckett Raider, and I don't know if it costs us money every time we ask him if we can put a monitoring well in or this, but I just wanted to bring the point up that,
Yeah, I don't believe, you understand, it's like a box.
it's the box, yeah.
The box is what they want, so I don't believe that is gonna have a humongous
Yeah, as long as
area
we're not
affected.
planning to put, like, extend our parking lot there, and then now we got a box in the middle of the parking, that was my only concern, stuff like that. I struggled with the diagram.
No, when I looked at the park plans, almost everything is happening away from this area.
Okay, all right, very good.
I move that we authorize the supervisor and clerk to grant the requested easement.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Nordine. All right, roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, renewal of Michigan Township participating plan for 2019.
All right, so this was discussed at length the last board meeting on the 26th of November, and Sir Paul Olson from the the Michigan Township Participation Plan, he was here to be able to go over the coverages. And based on that, the clerk was able to provide a detailed list of additions and subtractions associated with this. Based on that information that was provided, he requoted the plan. And what you have in front of you is the updated invoice from the Michigan Township's participating plan for 2019. Again, this coverage is effective 1/1 of 2019 through 1/1 of 2020. The summary of coverages for 2019 are in there, and the email provides an explanation of the changes from the previous quote. So this annual renewal for the municipal insurance coverage requires township board approval.
Comments?
Well, the comment I would like to make is this 71,447 does not include the 1906 for the cybersecurity that we discussed.
Correct.
Do we need to vote on that separately to include that coverage?
I think based on the discussion at the work session, there were a lot of questions associated with the cyber coverage and what that covers and what that does not cover. And so I wanted to be able to give you that amount. If we would like to be able to include that, obviously we could vote to be able to, the township board could vote to include that coverage and up that amount, or if we want to obtain clarification from Mr. Olson on those coverages, obviously we could do that as well. The main concern, the 71,447, we need to have that renewal associated with from last year to this year. Cyber coverage, we could do that if you're satisfied with, the information provided. If we need to go back to Mr. Olson or obtain clarification, obviously we can work to do that.
There's several provisions that we have to put in place typically when it comes to this kind of insurance before an insurance company would actually cover you if an incident occurred. And I think a chunk of that is these infrastructure changes we're going to make. So we're some months away from that anyways.
So we could implement that policy later on. We don't have it now. But given the fact that we do so much business electronically, I think it makes sense to have that coverage at some point here in the fairly near future, if we can do whatever we need to do to comply. I think we should put that as a priority. We don't have, I understand we can just get the insurance in place effective the first of the year, but I would think at one of our early board meetings at first of the year, we should decide on whether or not we want to have the cybersecurity once we have the things in place that need to be in place to comply with what the insurance company would require.
So I'd like to clarify a couple points just made by Mr. Weed, Mr. Palmer, and say that, first of all, I am not an insurance agent. So, but reading the glossy that's included here in the board pack, which is effectively the description of what coverage we're getting based on reading frequently asked questions. So this is not reading the policy itself, but in looking this over, it covers a variety of different things. It's not just one thing. It has a bunch of components to it. And the concern that none of this could be of benefit until we have our recabling and phone system and other improvements done with the network, I don't think that would necessarily be true. It would help, but because some of this, for example, has to do with privacy liability and privacy breach. And because that has to do with personally identifiable information, we still have that today with BSNA and systems like that, even yours in the clerk's office. So I don't think there's any reason to delay on it. And I think that the more improvements we make effectively, the better secured and covered we are, if that makes sense. Like, in other words, we're improving it, or preventing the possibility of breaches, but at the same time, we're making ourselves more qualified to be covered and not denied a coverage if an incident were to occur. Does that make sense? Okay, that's just my thought.
I have no experience with cyber liability coverage. In anyone's experience, is it an instance where we can go to the agent and say, can you help us with our policies and procedures, workers' compensation? They're more than
Right.
eager to come in and say,
Yes.
you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong.
Exactly.
Do these things. Can we get that kind of service so we know what kind of goal we're trying to attain to have be covered in instances, or are they
I think it's a
tight-lipped on
question
that?
for the agent.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
sure,
who knows? They might be, but who knows?
yeah.
I mean, we're not a small, we're a small township in a sense, but we're not a two-man company. So I think we're,
Okay. I can ask if he's got any feedback.
yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah, and I don't know if you can answer this, John, or if you have to make contact with him. For the automobile, it says based on 63 vehicles. Is that from 0 to 63? Or is he claiming we got 63? Or are we claiming we got 63
would
vehicles in the
say-
township?
I would say
I'd like to see them all.
my list contains you. I don't know that you would. 'Cause I've gone through the process. All right, 20 plus 44. My numbers say, what's that? 49, 59. Yeah, that's how many we have.
We actually
63.
got 59 vehicles?
63.
63.
53?
63. The number you first referenced.
Really?
Yeah. And I've weeded through quite a few. Yeah.
Wow.
That's surprising to me.
And I would welcome. I mean, if I can give you the list and we can track them down, because they're moving targets, literally. Like when you're trying to inventory the things. I've worked with the
63
department
vehicles?
heads. That's the number I've worked towards or worked to.
What's the definition of vehicle in this case? Are we
So
talking
we're
tractors and mowers and
No,
everything like that?
we're not
Okay.
talking tractors and mowers. That's under a different schedule, inland
Ah.
marine. So backhoes don't count. Dump trucks do, step vans do, fire trucks do, police cars do, DPW vehicles, oil park vehicles, code and zoning, superintendent.
Okay.
That's about, and
63.
trailers. This does count some trailers are under the vehicle. So
It's almost one per employee.
I could show you the list.
Wow.
It's an interesting list. It is.
Yes.
I've got all the information. You should come on by.
Wow.
Next time you're in, I'll
Yeah, that's.
and I'm not being cheeky or anything. I would welcome a second eye on it. It's been a tough task to figure out which ones we do have, which ones we don't.
Yeah, for 63, it's a tough task for a community this size, yes.
Yeah, it's makes you think. Yeah.
I'm, one other issue that I talked to John about this, and I was reviewing all of our real estate that we have, and, I'm working with a couple different department heads and trying to get them to come forward to you, Mr. Schaefer. There's some housing that's gotta be tore down. We're paying liability insurance on it, not need, we can tear it down, get rid of it. Once I get these department heads going in the right direction, they'll be in to see you, so we can get some more of this stuff taken off that we're paying insurance on that we don't need to. So it's taken a little bit longer than I thought, but I got their attention on it.
All right.
Yeah, I'll be in to see you for 63.
All right. Sounds good.
Anything else? Someone have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we renew with Par Plan for the municipal insurance coverage effective January 1st, 2019, for the amount of $71,447.
Support.
No cyber coverage?
And look into the cyber coverage and just, do we want to bring that back to have the options for, I'm sure there's different tiers of security. Yeah,
I just wanted to
Amounts of
know if
coverage.
you were including that or not.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
That we do cover for it, or that we look into it? If we cover for it, then the amount's $73,353.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I withdraw my support.
I support.
So you're amending your move to make it 73?
Yes,
Okay,
to include the cyber.
yes.
Without any research on it, or,
Well, that's with the research of what he said, right?
A motion of $71,447 will renew our normal insurance coverage. An amount of $73,353 would include the $1,900 for cyber insurance.
Is there different tiers of cyber liability?
It's more like how much coverage. It's kind of like when you have a car and you have a deductible for $500 or $250 or $100 or none, and whether you have an incident insurance, like let's say you have $1 million of I don't know, property liability coverage or something like that, right? Yeah, you could have 2 million if you wanted, but
Right.
so it's really just a matter of how much per occurrence is your coverage, and how many incidents, and you get into that kind of thing. So
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I changed my motion to include the cyber liability for $73,353.
yeah, and he says in the pages that follow this quote what those per occurrences are, what the limits were. It's just, it reads a lot like your car insurance or your home insurance policy.
I see it there.
Okay, motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings.
Yes, sir.
Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
no.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes,
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
No. Motion's passed. Next, AKT Peerless Professional Services Contract.
All right, so Oscoda Township currently has a professional services contract agreement with AKT Peerless to provide environmental services associated with the chemicals referred to as PFAS. This goes back a ways, and the original contract was for $3,300. Your packet contains a proposal, updated professional services contract agreement with AKT Peerless to also provide consulting for the township's brownfield program and redevelopment in the amount of $29,000. Packet also contains a proposal from AKT Peerless detailing the brownfield program redevelopment services. As previously discussed during the 11-14 Township Board Budget Work Session number 3, the $29,000 is included in the township's 2019 proposed appropriations. And how that works is basically the brownfield program that $29,000 would include marketing materials associated with 3 potential redevelopment projects that would qualify. So this also kind of works towards redevelopment-ready community certifications. They're going to require that you have 3 projects. The brownfield can provide a template for other redevelopment-associated projects. The brownfield proposals will be much more complex than your traditional. And Public Act 381 is a very complex piece of legislation that they have the expertise to be able to provide training and support for our brownfield authority. And so that is what we aim to be able to get that rolling again in 2019.
Comments?
Well, I would just say that if we get the effort out of AKT Peerless with the 29,000 that we got out of them for the $3,000, we'll be doing pretty well. They put a lot of effort in here and made a lot of trips up here and had meetings, did a lot of work on our behalf for $3,300.
Yep.
So in this brownfield redevelopment is a complicated issue. It really is, and we certainly need it's something we need to address. But we need some help with that, and I think they would be a good source for that help. So.
I agree with you on that point. Also, there's been great success with the brownfield program in areas, let's say, down in Bay City.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name of the section there right along the water, but that was a beautiful example of how that was turned around and made into a beautiful area.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful area. So, I mean, I would love to see something like that here.
I'm extremely excited about the brownfield possibilities that we could pursue. And I think it's important what Mr. Palmer said about the work AKT Peerless has done to this point for the $3,000. They've popped up from time to time. I know there's been some want for information from citizens and people on the board sometimes because they came up and had a bunch of meetings, like Mr. Palmer said, and we never fully got to implementing some of those things, but they did do a lot of groundwork that has been effective. It wasn't all for naught. They did do a lot of work. It wasn't readily apparent to a lot of people, but I just want the public to know kind of the history with them, and they were helpful on the PFAS issue in some regards, smaller, and then quite a bit in some strategic planning and different things. So I just want to make that clear that
Township Communications.
yes.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the professional service contract with AKT Peerless in the amount of $29,000 to provide brownfield program and redevelopment consulting services.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Are we discussing the Centria healthcare document?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
We still have details of the lease to work out with that. And I have no updates regarding payment for MacArthur construction. Looks like it's probably gonna be next week before we know anything further.
I assume no further progress on the,
Yeah, what does know anything further mean?
They have submitted a pay request to get paid in full. Spicer has redlined several items in it that were outstanding, such as the 22 service leads that were defective. And MacArthur has, within so many days to respond, I don't remember that number of days, but I think that lands at the beginning of next week. once we know what that response is, we'll know what to do from there, if we're gonna make a partial payment or how we're gonna proceed in general.
And they haven't taken any action on the lines that
No,
were defective or not
No.
up to standard? Okay.
And by defective, you mean they weren't up to spec, they're not at the proper depth or something?
correct.
Is that the only problem, or just one of the types of problems that we've experienced?
A couple of items with the road gravel.
Ah,
Other than that, it's mainly the depth of those service leads and one portion of the main that's too shallow.
well, we're having good weather to test it out.
They did make some corrections, didn't they? Didn't they move a fire hydrant? Did
Yes,
move-
they did do a few corrections.
Okay.
All right, so item J, F&V contract amendment.
All right, so what you have in your, that I emailed out, I provided hard copies. You have the, information from the township attorney with a proposed, professional services contract update with F&V operations, as well as the proposal associated with the utility billing clerk. And I gave the specific line items as far as how that information is already baked into the proposed 2019 appropriations.
Comments?
Well, I had a couple of questions. I think overall it's a good idea. But I had a question on the responsibilities of the Oscoda Charter Township. The third one says provide administrative supplies and equipment necessary to perform scope of work, such billing, cards, receipts. That seems pretty straightforward. Provide access to township computer, that kind of goes without saying. The one I had a question on is to provide and pay for all billing-related items. I don't know exactly what that means. Unless Dave has a understanding of that.
Administrative equipment forms as billing cards, receipt, and work order forms?
No, actually, it's the very first one that I have a question on.
Provide and pay for all billing-related items.
That seems a little vague to me.
And so, right now, billing cards, receipt, okay, so the billing cards, the receipt, okay, a good example, which isn't in the third, administrative supplies. For example, we order door tags. When those come in, we have to be able to have those to put out the shut-off notices. All of the billing-related items that come into play. I think what they don't detail in, obviously, we would be paying for the postage associated with billing, either running that through the machine or taking it to the post office, and any sort of communications with our customers. Billing for
Okay.
all
And so
billing-related
those things wouldn't be covered in administrative supplies
Postage?
in number 3?
Maybe administrative supplies is more like the toner and paper
Right,
and that kind
yeah.
of thing.
Pencils?
Billing covers your billing cards, the reminder shut-offs, the door tags, the work orders. I think that pretty much covers it for billing. I
Okay.
think administrative would be more like pens, paper, the toner, stuff like that would be my assumption, but.
Yeah, the second two were pretty straightforward, I thought. The first one, I don't know, seemed a little vague. Of course, I'm not in the billing department, so I... The other question I had is farther down for the contract year. It says for year 3, December 2nd, 2018 through May 1st. And I think in the letter, F&V said they wouldn't be able to start for 3 or 4 weeks, so I'm assuming this would start January 1st.
Around the second is what they're targeting.
Second, so this contract year, that would be changed from December 2nd to?
And that's why it's all marked up in red for draft there.
Yeah, okay.
We would not be starting to pay until we have somebody there to be able to get it rolling.
Okay, and then these monthly fees, year 3, 4, and 5, those are, according to what I could figure, the second year would be a 2% increase. It appeared that the next one was a 3% increase, so that's just their, like the township has for their normal increase in fees on an ongoing basis for employees. I mean, we have the same structure for our employees, and assuming F&V has the same thing.
That would actually be similar to what is in the operations contract itself, where there's an annual increase in fees. We do not have our employees under a labor contract similar to what the township does. They're at-will employees, and so all pay raises are meritorious. So those can be in excess of that, for good performance. So that is strictly like the consumer price index type of increase that's in the O&M contract.
Okay, so that was, we had indicated changes in years 3, 4, and 5?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else before I sit down?
That's all I had.
Sit.
Any other comments?
Is this a position that would be advertised by F&V?
Yes.
And is there, I didn't really see, I might be missing it, but was there a clause like, let's say, 6 months from now, we just, for whatever reason, don't feel that's working out, we can get out of it?
I believe that's in our original professional service agreement.
With
the
with you
residents of
overall?
Cause. Yeah,
Okay.
basically, there's items in that for termination with cause and also for termination without cause, notification time for that separation.
Okay. That could just affect this position and not F&V overall.
Right.
How do these costs in the proposal compare to the costs we currently have in providing the service?
So I was provided with a comparison as far as what it would cost. Right now, you will see in the schedule from weekday, so Monday through Friday, we are providing window hours from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., closed from noon to 1. So it's 9 to noon and 1 to 4 is when that window is open. And we need to improve customer service as far as for our customers and availability. And the comparison I could give you would be to a full-time position associated with going from the part-time to the full-time in-house versus going part-time to the full-time with F&V. That cost is not that great of a difference. However, we're going to get more window coverage. We're going to get coverage so that when that employee is at lunch, there is also coverage there to be able to pick that up. And so the comparison as far as what it is now, that has been identified as if we keep doing what we're doing, we're probably going to get the same results. And we need to improve what we're currently doing.
Any other comments? Is there a motion? I'll wait on roll call.
Yeah.
I'll move that we approve the proposed contract with F&V in the amount stated.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings.
Yeah, I just want to wait for Ms. McGuire to come back.
Yes.
In the meantime, to fill the silence,
So if you
how
tap dance.
long is the length of time on the contract with F&V? The original contract, how many more?
The contract was renewed in 2016
Okay.
for 5 years.
5 years? Okay.
And I believe
That's
that
the
is what
contract.
coincides
Yeah,
here with May 1st of 2021. That's
Okay.
why it's structured that way.
exactly. Yep.
Waiting on you.
Are you kidding me?
Nope.
We sang Jingle Bells twice.
All right, we have a motion to approve the F&V contract amendment. Any other comments? Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution ordinances. First, resolution 2018-28 regarding township supervisor salary for 2019.
Right. So this was discussed at the township work session number 3 on November 14th, and what this represents is a 2% increase, and you are going to see the similar format for resolutions 2018, 28, 29, 30, and 31.
So resolution for supervisor pay would increase by a whopping amount to a total of $15,337.78.
Reflective of a 2% raise, correct? This is what's
Correct.
baked into that.
Correct. Is there a motion?
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
This will be the 6th time that you and some of the rest of us have had a chance to vote on this. And if my memory serves, you almost always, probably always vote no on yours, whether it was when you were a trustee or now. And so with all due respect, are you voting, if I'm right, are you voting no because you don't want the raise or you don't want any pay? I never understood that. And I have a second follow-up, but
My no's were based on the state of our budget during those times that I felt that the pay increases weren't justified for that.
so it's basically the increases.
This will be the first year I'm voting yes on pay increases.
You've just killed my second question.
Right.
Because I was gonna say, if you're gonna vote no again, do you want me to follow you? Some support on it, you know, so.
Try to be supportive.
So I've got a comment to break from trends. I've voted yes in my limited experience, I think every time. This time I plan to vote in the opposite direction because we don't have any union contracts in place. And in my mind, our the raises affiliated with these positions mimic or mirror what's in the contracts, and it's an assumption as to what those will be at this time. So
And if you historically look back, I don't know if a POAM or POLC contract has ever been
Yes,
settled
yeah,
in
no,
time.
no, I'm not pointing towards the timing on that. Just this is the first time I find myself in a contract year voting on one of these. And my position of if I vote as a 2% increase on all of these positions, and then there's some argument or contention over a raise there, it makes that harder, at least for me. So that's and also acknowledging this is just always not enjoyable and awkward.
Voting yourself
It's
a
true,
raise.
it is awkward.
It is awkward. Well, a couple comments on that. Number one, it isn't done exclusively by one person.
What's that?
Any of these.
These? No,
That's,
certainly.
that's number one. Number two, with the exception, and not to be awkward as well again, but with the exception of treasurer and clerk, these are really more like honorariums because no one's going to find $15,337 to be a survivable income for somebody doing a position that actually could require a good number of hours. So, and then certainly it's true for the trustees. So, I do get your point, but I just sort of see it as I'm not so sure I follow or agree, but I
Sure,
get
we
your point.
certainly have different vantage points. Mine
Fair
being
enough.
more
Yeah.
in line with the employees of the township, and yours
Understood.
not. So it could explain the
Yep, fair enough.
different perspectives.
Yep.
I would just say that I think the trustees are vastly underpaid.
The vast number of hours I put in, I'll tell you.
Just a personal observation, given the time that we put in, but that's another story.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
I think we have a board that's putting in a lot of time for township business, and we are getting paid. Well, I can't. Clerk and treasurer are different because they are full-time positions, but I believe the rest of us are getting paid well below minimum wage.
Please,
And
clearly.
after going through our selection process for a superintendent, I'm now under the mindset that I think the pay for the board members is important because
I'm
it'll
sorry, I missed the word, is what?
is important
Is important, okay.
because I think it also I would like to see the continuance of more. I guess it increases the incentive so that we can continue to have much more qualified people running for these positions. I think that low pay is a deterrent in some regards.
Okay.
So I want to keep us seeing going forward like we are.
Right.
Well, I will make a motion to approve resolution 2018-28, setting the township supervisor's salary at $15,337.78, effective 1 January 2019.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire.
Can I make one final comment?
Yes.
And considering what I said before, I just want to make very clear, nothing personal in my votes here.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes,
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2018-29, township clerk salary for $47,599.36. I make the motion for approving that resolution.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
yes,
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2018-30, township treasurer salary for 2019 at $47,599.36. I make a motion to approve that resolution.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. excuse me, Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yeah.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2018-31, Township Trustee Salary for 2019 at $4,362.42 per trustee. I make that motion.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
I apologize, Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
It's bound to happen at least once a year.
I know.
Is it
It's
from the
okay, John.
Christmas party?
Mr. Cummings,
What?
Yes.
Got that.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2018-32, fiscal year 2019 General Appropriations Act.
All right, so we had our public hearing as required. And in here, you will see, I have provided hard copy of the resolution 2018-32, and you have the supporting documentation for what was presented in the, at the time available of the board packet, and then everybody has a 2018-32 modified as far as including appropriations of $70,000 for the Downtown Development Authority Fund and $22,000 for the DDA Operating Fund. And so those modifications were proposed and submitted based on the board approving the 2019 DDA appropriations for Fund 248 and 252. I wanted to provide both.
Any comments?
Typo a little bit on the page that actually has the resolution. If you'll take a look at that, resolution regarding fiscal year 2016.
First page?
Not on this one.
I have 16, it's
2000
2018, 33.
32.
Oh, okay, all right,
The next
all right.
resolution.
Yep.
Okay.
I had the same one, but we're not there yet.
I'm sorry.
So just to be clear, the $70,000 that's represented here on the modified version is described as Downtown Development Authority Fund. Is this the fund which is created by the TIF and
Correct.
other, okay, good. And the DDA operating fund of 22,000 even is the
Millage.
income from the millage?
Correct.
Thank you, very good. Just for clarity here.
So this resolution is for fiscal year 2019, correct?
It is.
The resolution is 2018-32
Right.
that approves 2019 appropriations.
Okay,
So is the title
not as it
2000?
states above in the
Yeah.
title.
I'm sorry, what?
In the third line where it says the Charter Township of Oscoda resolution regarding General Appropriations Act fiscal year 2018, that should be 19.
Right. The third line. Mhm. Should be 2019, should be,
2019.
right, on both copies.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2018-32 modified.
Support.
Modified.
Support.
I have a question.
Oh,
Yes.
sure, good.
Under section 9, in the last sentence, says shall not issue any town order for expenditures that exceed. Town order,
Yeah, that's the
lingo,
I'm using the exact same language as
okay.
from before, changing numbers, not all of them, obviously.
Okay.
Any other comments? Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes,
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2018-33, fiscal year 2018 budget amendment number 1.
I see your fiscal year, yes, that should be 2018. I apologize for that.
You talking to me?
Yes.
Yes, so right now, we have not made budget adjustments, and you will see at length many different budget adjustments in there, basically in your packet, from, oh my goodness. 109 through 116 are the proposed appropriations adjustments. And why we're doing this is to be able to move money appropriately to rectify lines that are currently negative, and then lines that have too much money appropriated, we're moving from. This is governmental accounting. You are moving funds from one line to the other. Obviously, in here, this authorizes me to be able to move among the cost centers with the Appropriations Act. I'm not exactly sure how this was done previously. I would like to be able to do this on a more continuous basis than once a year. Because if we only do it once a year, there's quite a bit of cleanup at the end.
Yeah. So I have questions about this. I guess mostly in the context of why. So there are literally hundreds of adjustments here. So, and I'm looking at one, for example, on page 110. It's part of Fund 250 for a land purchase for $63,842 even. And if my memory serves, that was for a piece of property we purchased in March or April. And we're just now getting around to adjusting for a check we must have already written.
It is the general fund, so it's a component of the general fund. So 101,
Right.
and then 250 being Lakefront District. And you are correct, that was associated with a purchase of property. And yes, we are just moving the money now.
So,
yeah.
so
Not
how do we,
cash, but the
I'm sorry, what was that, Tammy?
The appropriation, not not cash itself.
Right, right. We've already written the check.
Right.
Right, I mean, we had to have,
Yes.
right? But, so does that mean that we must, well, I guess, no, general fund wouldn't have gone negative in that case, so we wouldn't have been in an override, but we have to basically put money in the proper little sub-fund here to accommodate this purchase.
Right.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, Are these the same kinds of appropriations that we did 71 of with the last audit?
No, it's totally something different. What had happened in this instance is Bob in Dave's position before, right after that was gone, so he was not able to nobody made the budget adjustment because it's a function of the superintendent's office. Where Bob would do budget adjustments throughout the year.
Right.
Like 3 or 4, I'm guessing, if I recall correctly. Throughout the year, he would bring those budget adjustments to us to say, okay, because we did not budget the year before for that purchase of the property. So our budget was set.
Right.
So then we purchased this property, so then we need to amend the budget to make it so that that's whole.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
So how do we, okay, so still, this is December, and that was, let's say, March or April, I don't remember which.
Because Bob was gone, Dave was new, didn't know anything that we bought this property, so then it was never addressed till recently.
Okay,
That's a specific scenario, just generally.
yeah,
Usually these were done maybe in 2 or 3 chunks. This year, the course of events took us to doing them in just one big one. I can't speak for Mr. Schaefer, but the work that goes into rooting through the budget, compiling which ones, I would assume is just a judgment call to just do one big one versus, I mean, he was getting his legs under him and everything. So again, I don't want to speak for Mr.
that's
Schaefer.
fine,
but-
okay. But if it was, so I'm trying to get my head around what I'm looking at, because if I know we've agreed to spend the money, clearly we made a decision by the board, and we purchased something, or we agreed that it was a certain expense, and we approved it in our monthly
Yeah.
expenditures. But what I'm not understanding is that, how would we know what's left if we were looking at our general ledger? We would be seeing a lot of negatives, I would be thinking, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so how do you know what's left, kind of thing? I mean, how do you know where you're,
Well, that's one of the things we're working towards next year.
oh, I see,
Yeah.
okay.
I must stop discussion right now. We have reached 9:30. So if we're gonna continue on until up to 10 PM, I need a motion to be able to do so.
I'll make a motion that we continue with the meeting until adjourned.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Okay, please continue.
Same with there's been a lot of training this year that
Yeah.
people haven't gone to before. So what was budgeted, in anticipation last year at this time, you didn't have any clue that more people were gonna go to different trainings, that type of thing. So then the budget gets adjusted within that budget, per
Right.
se. So, which is all of these things that poor Davis had to go through and try to figure all those out.
Okay, so I could see, for example, let's say we allocate $5,000 to a particular topic, whatever that might be, phone bill or something like that, right? I mean, right, so, but we don't know exactly how much that bill's gonna be, we just allocate money
Right.
toward it, hoping that it covers it. Clearly, by the time we get to the end of the year, we're starting to see whether we're a little over, a little under, and we're gonna move some of that over and maybe accommodate another fund, which could be negative because it needs money to become positive.
Right.
Because again, we've already spent it. What I'm thinking is, so I guess to your point earlier, we're gonna fix this, but the fix is actually that we would do this more often.
Right.
Well-
Yes.
Right?
More frequent, actually, we do it, the communication between the treasurer's office and Dave's office is going to be more so and more, we're going to get to a point, ideally, we're going to get to a point where we allocate and you just don't go over. That's the way it is by the end of the year.
That's the way
That's
the
the
policy
point.
we adopted earlier.
That
is
was the
written.
BSNA policy I
Yes.
asked about,
Yeah,
right?
employees and-
Right.
and elected officials shall not have the ability to override deficient budget line items, with the exception of a critical emergency situation jointly decided upon by the supervisor and superintendent. The Board of Trustees will then be immediately notified of the override. circumstances, and adjustments will be taken
Right.
to. So, under the property situation,
Right,
we would have to do a budget adjustment when we make the motion to purchase the property, or we won't be able to cut a check at closing.
That's
that would
right.
make sense.
And we did
That's-
that.
And we are in training right now, and when we make large purchases, there are line items for where those are coming out of.
That's right.
And when we have motions in the future, they will need to include that so that everybody is on the same page about how we're robbing Peter to pay Paul with those specific items.
So when
Right.
we go back tomorrow, after a purchase is made like that,
Right.
David's got the appropriation fixed, so when Jane goes to pay that bill, the money's there to pay it.
So we're gonna
So
make
we
a,
will not go
we're gonna
over.
make a motion to change the appropriation in the moment, or we're gonna need a formal resolution?
So everybody understands, okay? In the modified language that was,
Yes, sir.
for the Appropriations Act,
No, I see.
all right? I have the ability as the CAO to be able to move, okay, money. Township officials responsible for the expenditures authorized in the budget may not expend township funds up to, but not to exceed, the total appropriation authorized for each cost center. So for example, in 250, if we had almost $64,000 in another line item to move it, I could move it. However, no transfers of appropriations for line items related to personnel or capital outlays may be made without board approval by budget amendment. So if we're moving money from professional services to legal fees,
Right,
we can make that happen.
correct.
If we need to all of a sudden replace a dump truck,
Yep.
then
With
we're
le-
gonna have to,
With legal fees.
yeah.
We can't do that.
Or if I wanna appropriate, hey, I wanna hire somebody and we're gonna pay them $50,000 a year, I
Right.
can't just move money to that personnel line item without coming to you to say, is this okay?
Wow, that's a great step forward.
Yeah, we do need to make sure that we're not, that the General Appropriations Act isn't in conflict with the BSNA policy access controls that we just passed,
Were you talking to him or me?
to the room.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no,
You
not-
flipped
not-
it all of a sudden,
yeah,
I went,
not-
what?
Not you specifically, no.
Yeah,
So if you
fair
wanna-
enough. Yeah, because that's what I was looking at that earlier, and then I was piecing it together with this. So, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think things are starting to vertically align now. It's like it's starting to make sense.
And I will point out that the December 11th meeting of 2017, Resolution 2017-30 was fiscal year budget amendments number 2. So it was only done twice in 2017.
Yeah.
And it is not as critical when you have a fresh set of appropriations.
Right.
But, there needs to be updates. I think you have a much better idea as far as cost center with the fund summary report
Right.
that's provided.
Right.
That fund summary report gives you a detail of the different cost centers
Right.
of where we're at and in those funds, and a barometer for if we are 75% of the way through the budget after quarter one. That gives you an understanding. We gotta start asking questions. What's going on?
Right. That's right. Yeah, it makes the reports more meaningful as you're traipsing through the year. Yep, that makes sense. Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Glad to see that's happening. Thank you.
Any other comments? Is there a motion? I make a motion to approve resolution number 2018-33 with the change from 2016 to 2019.
Yeah, support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Now on to other. Bill payment authorization for December 26, 2018.
Because of the board meeting for Christmas Eve, we won't be having one, then I am asking the board for approval to pay bills in the middle of the holiday season. They will show up on your prepaid list at the next scheduled regular meeting in January. So you'll have a chance to review them then.
Sure.
I need a motion or approval to do that.
I would move that we do this formula for a bill payment for the rest of December.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Township Board meeting and pre-meeting work session schedule.
Can we back up just 1 second? On the previous resolution, 2018-33, you mentioned the change to fiscal year 2019. That should be 2018, I believe. This
Yeah,
is
that's correct.
budget amendment for 2018.
Because it's current year.
2018.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
We're still in consensus with it?
Yes.
Consensus.
All right, pre-meeting work schedule.
Yeah. Well,
All right, you wanna go over this?
I'll go for it.
All right.
Yeah, so, at least by the first meeting of the year, which will be in January, we have to have a schedule of regular meetings, to post in Township Hall. So this is that list. Since we have regularly scheduled work sessions now, we've got those on there. Those were on there last year as well. So you'll note in May, there's a regular board meeting missing that falls on Memorial Day. And so the corresponding work session is also gone. Two other points of interest. One, I have on here a work session that would fall on Good Friday. That Mr. Schaefer pointed out to me, so we probably need to strike that one.
April 19th.
April 19th. So we should make the motion, as long as we all agree, to remove that one. Township Hall will be closed that day. And then the only other interesting point of this schedule of the way things align this year is there would be a regularly scheduled meeting on December 23rd. So this year it's on Christmas Eve. Last year it was on Christmas itself. It's not technically on a holiday this year, so I put it on there because it's not on a holiday. It's better to have a meeting scheduled. Easier to cancel a meeting than it is to schedule one. So, but I put it on there because it fit the formula, but it's open to the board's discretion as to whether one will be held that night.
It's fine.
So,
So what do the board members think about December 23rd meeting?
I think we should leave it on there and you know, you don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe you might need that meeting. Probably not.
I mean, it's just like this year.
I don't want anybody throwing anything at me right now.
No. But just like we haven't canceled the
Couldn't
second
be
one
here.
here in
But we
December
can,
yet.
I mean, we have
Well,
lots of
it
time
was never scheduled.
to vote.
because it was
and
on
Oh, it's
cancel.
never scheduled? Oh, I see, okay. Fair
Haven't
enough.
been scheduled for a while.
Oh, I got it, I
But-
see.
Well, nobody threw anything at you, so I'm gonna ask a question. The planning commission, when we have a holiday falls on our Monday, we schedule our planning commission for Tuesday, so we go ahead and, so I'm wondering, for the May meetings, could we schedule it to Tuesday?
I'm open to that.
Possibility.
So far, I don't think we've had any problem with
Skipping
just
the meeting?
skipping a
No.
meeting when there's a holiday involved.
Yeah.
We really only skip two, right? It's either
Yeah.
4th of July or the
Christmas.
Labor Day and then Christmas, right? Or Memorial Day, I'm sorry.
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day, the 4th of July, or, yeah, and then Christmas. Speak that right. So, yeah.
Doesn't matter to me, I have no problem working on holidays, but
Yeah.
whatever it's up to all of you.
No, I get that. No, I got it.
I don't generally leave much, so.
So,
I think it's fine.
do we have a motion then that also clarifies, what was that date, April?
April
19.
19th.
April 19th.
Oh,
Under the work sessions.
yeah, and that's the work session
Yeah.
one, yeah, so for the April 19th meeting and the December 23rd meeting and the December 20th meetings.
Well, I think everything can stand except the 19th is what I'm guessing, right? Just
And then
leave it all and we just
cancel it later. if
deal
we don't have
with it.
anything.
Yeah, exactly. I'm good with that.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, so then I move that we adopt the Township Board meeting and pre-meeting work session schedule as outlined in the board pack for 2019 with the deletion of April 19th work session.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, the formation of a township negotiating team.
All right. So, right now, we have a new POLC negotiating representative for that represents the police, formerly POAM. And so I have met with them several times. I do not think that we are worlds apart, but I think the representation of some township board members will help get a deal across the finish line. And I don't know how this was previously done. I have a semblance of a clue, and I believe that the inclusion of several board members, potentially 3, to meet with POLC and their representatives, I think can be a lot more productive than back and forth that I'm getting with the representation. I would like to be able to engage the board, see if there are volunteers for 3 representatives. I would want to be able to schedule a briefing, get on the same page, and go in to POLC that this is what we want to be able to offer. And have the board understand that, and see and hear and experience that, so that they understand where POLC is also coming from. I think that would be beneficial to striking a deal and being able to move forward in 2019 with a contract.
Is the time frame for this committee, I guess we can officially call it?
I'll nothing to say about that, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll leave you to, well, I'll put air quotes around it for now then. Then, is the time frame just for the month of December?
What I would be asking is, I am reluctant to ask 3 board members to get with me prior or week of Christmas. I would want to be able to try to establish something that very first week of January as far as a briefing, and be able to give you preparation materials between now and that briefing so that we come in and be able to iron that out to meet with POLC very soon after that, and be able to gauge his availability so that we can kind of take this across the finish line.
So you're not looking for any time in December then?
No.
Oh, okay.
But the next time we meet is
As a board, it's January 14th.
correct. And I'd like to be able to, between now and then, start getting that lined up, engaging availability. Ideally, if I can get 3, that would be fantastic.
So, and my input is on.
Yep, good, please.
Is, if done correctly, I think this is a very wise thing. I think Mr. Schaefer's got a good plan to do it correctly, so. Second thing is, with the numbering of the group, I raised a question to Mr. Schaefer of how many numbers we can send in there, and what constitutes a committee.
Got it.
Historically, in my experience and looking back in records, 3 members have constituted a subcommittee. I asked Mr. Schaefer, we don't have a legal say that says that. State of Michigan says 4 people constitute a subcommittee, because then you've got a quorum. So, and we picked the attorney's brain, who has a long tenure here, and he said in his tenure, he sees nothing internally that imposes a restriction that says 3 is a subcommittee. And so we don't have anything that says 3 is a subcommittee, but historically 3 has been a subcommittee. So my assumption is we were doing that for a reason. Assumptions are dangerous. We will want to, I mean, we can pursue that. But so the numbering is a factor. I think more people is good. If we can swing 3, that's good. I just wanted to
It's good to know.
bring that forward.
Well, I'm interested as a point, so.
Well, I'd be willing to help on that if you need some. I've had employees and dealt with employees. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. But,
Right, yeah. Right.
I'm more than willing. I would be the first one to bow out, though, for various reasons, but I certainly would be interested.
What are you smiling for?
I'm out of pocket for the rest of December.
I understand.
I wish I could help you out. I can't, but I would provide a counterbalance. I don't mean to embarrass you, Jamie. But I can remember her a few years ago saying, Jim, you're a nice man, but if you had your way, you'd give away every dollar that we have. So I don't think you want me on this committee, if she's right.
They don't want you on that committee. And it's true.
you're still holding to that, Jamie?
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah.
I have documentation to prove it. Going back to 2002.
Yep.
You're an easy touch. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm interested.
I'll never
Throw my
forget
hat
that.
in, get board approval.
So my comfort level would be sending 2. I'm okay to send 3 if the board wants to.
I think 3 is
I'm fine with
more
3.
impressive.
3 is more impressive.
Yeah.
I think there's value in 3.
Well, there's actually a point here that an even number of board members plus Mr. Schaefer creates an odd number that would then, I think that helps. I don't know if you're looking for us to weigh in on a kind of like a little threesome vote, or with you as to try what direction we might go to, or how you're looking for that to all work out. But I mean, odd numbered groups tend to be better decision-making entities.
And I don't have a vote, but I can help frame,
Sure, yeah.
and
So
I-
we
Would you
need
be-
3.
Would you be looking for this group to vote?
no.
I don't think so. Okay.
No.
'Cause then we're done. Then we're really getting into
No.
subcommittee territory. Okay.
No,
But
we're
to
talking-
understand
Yeah,
Sure. I see.
There
I just
are
want to clarify
nuanced
what we're
issues.
creating here.
within that, they would like to be able to, explain and understand, and we can dedicate some time to really go into those.
January and February, I'm gonna be scarce, or I would go, because I've had dealings with this in the past. But I'd have to have a backup if I went. I'd be looking at John. But depends how many meetings we have to have.
I would hope a prep and a meeting with
Finish.
POLC, and we would be able to move forward.
I make a motion the township forms a negotiating team comprised of Mr. Cummings, Mr. Palmer, and Mr. Nordine, with Mr. Gajewski being a fill-in alternate if one is to be absent.
Support that motion.
Any comments on that?
Does that work for you, Mark?
Yeah, I'm gonna be scarce, so I just don't wanna put us in a situation where we're coming real close and I got it back. I won't be here.
I'll talk
I
to your
just
wife.
want, I don't want, yeah, I know.
So this would not be for being there. This is only if one is missing, then
The
the
other one
fourth would
fills in.
fill it. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Final item, strategic development work session.
I am proposing, and Mr. Joe Borgstrom has availability, on Friday, the 11th of January. And you will see, that is the first scheduled work session on what was just approved for the 2019 schedule. And so we would be doing something very similar, where we have our regularly scheduled work session at 9, and go into a strategic session at 10, with a cap of 2 hours.
I'm sorry, say that again.
With a cap at 2 hours?
You want to
Yeah,
go in
okay.
at 9 to our regular scheduled meeting.
An hour regularly
I
scheduled
see.
at 10 a.m.
Stop.
with stopping at noon. So from 10
Okay.
to noon.
Okay, so we
But
would
I
be
would
here
hold you
from 9 to
captive from
noon.
9 to noon, is
Okay, all
basically
right,
what
very
I'm
good.
asking.
That's what I want to make sure we have enough time, because I'm quite interested in reaching the end of the process there.
Give me the date again.
The 11th, January 11th.
Thank you.
Any comments? Is that good with everyone?
It's good with me.
Okay, I make a motion, we have a strategic development work session, January 11th, from 10 PM to 12, I'm sorry, from 10 AM to 12 PM at the library.
Support.
Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, second public comment period. There's a 4-minute time limit. If you come up to the podium, please introduce yourself. Do you have any comments?
Everybody's left.
I applaud you for staying.
Yeah. Jenny had to.
Yeah, you too, Jenny. I applaud you as well.
All right, then on to board comments. Does anybody have anything? Yes.
First of all, I'd like to remind everybody that Oscoda Township Hall will be closed December 24th and 25th, and also on the 31st and January 1st. If you want to come in to pay your taxes, we will be open the 26th, 27th, and 28th. If you want to get them in and paid by the end of the year. And also on the 28th, we'll stay open till 6 p.m. in case people have to work till 5, just so you can get in there and get your taxes paid. You can also use the drop box back there on any one of those nights if you want to get in there to make sure that they're paid by the end of the year. Also, I want to remind everybody that tomorrow is the December board review in the assessor's office. If you had any questions or changes that you want to question to the assessor about your taxable value, or perhaps you were 100% disabled veteran and you did not file for your exemption this year yet, it's just a little reminder to make sure you do that by tomorrow. Otherwise, it won't count for the year. So if you have any questions, you can call them at 739-7071, and they'll be meeting tomorrow. I believe at 1 o'clock, but you want to make sure you call and find out for sure. That's all I have.
I want to wish the board and Oscoda Township a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
I have a little nostalgic story, and I'll hurry because we're running out of time.
3 minutes.
2 weeks ago when we met, we had 4 retired presidents. Now we have 3. the loss of George H.W. Bush has a little bit of an Oscoda link that I would care to share with you. He had declared he was going to run for president. George Bush was Ronald Reagan's vice president for 8 years, and this was 1988. And for some reason, I forget the background, but he was going to appear at the National Guard camp at Camp Grayling. And the call went out to high schools. I guess it was his specific request. He wanted high school kids to come. They have an auditorium at Camp Grayling, and kind of a nice one. So Northern Michigan high schools were asked to drum up some kids to go to Grayling. We filled 2 school bus loads and went over there, and this was again 1988. The base closed in 1993. So this is integral to the story. So we went in there and sat as a cluster, and other high schools were in little clusters around. And he came in from behind us, Vice President Bush, and came down the aisle and waved at different schools. And when he got to Oscoda High School, he stopped in his tracks. Now, I don't know, we were a little more cosmopolitan in 1988. That's a nice word, eh? Everybody else was lily white, but not Oscoda, and maybe that's the reason. Maybe somebody had given him a heads up. But regardless, he stopped and shook hands with every kid and every chaperone.
Wow.
He was the nicest guy. The kids were blown away about how regular guy he was. Those kids are now 48 years old, including one of my daughters. I couldn't convince her to go on this trip, had she gone. But that was the class of '88, and anyway, he was just a really nice guy and really paid attention to Oscoda. The only president I've ever shook hands with, so we lost a good guy. So,
Thank you.
end of story.
That's
Next
great.
day, he wound up at Alpena High School in the gym.
Pardon me?
The next day, he wound up at Alpena High School
I
in the
don't
gym.
doubt that, yeah. But everybody else just got to wait. We got to stop and handshake, so.
I've got one, just referencing the strategic planning work session that we scheduled for January 11th. I would encourage people to come to it. The work that's been done with Mr. Joe Borgstrom has been very exciting and interesting, and hopefully furthering. I would just encourage people to come to the meeting. That's it.
All right.
I want to add that those kids are now 48. I, on the other hand, has remained at 39. And so,
Say it.
Well, I served in the military under George Bush, and those were some good years.
He's my boss for a little bit.
All right, then nothing further. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Then we are adjourned. Thanks for coming out.
Marathon.